Prepare.
Sorry for that.
Now you're live streaming on YouTube.
Okay. So, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. It's still morning. No matter where you are, it's morning. With us today is our friend Jim Cooper, the big dog, host of the Hydrant podcast, voiceover artist extraordinaire, audiobook narrator, and just all around awesome person. Because we love you.
Yay, thank you. I love you guys.
Well, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
We get to flip the tables a little bit and learn about Jim Cooper.
Everything you ever wanted to know and probably don't want to know once we're done with all this, but that's okay.
Well, the reason that we're here is because there's probably something about you that they don't know. And that is you are a published author.
Yay!
Yay!
Yes.
Tell us about your journey. Like what brought you to writing?
Ever since I was a kid, it was something it was a goal I had. It's like I wanted to write a book. I didn't care whether it sold. I just wanted to get a book written and published. So I grew up, in front of a typewriter and I had, files and files of all these story ideas and different starts and stops and that kind of thing. And finally got serious about it. Oh gosh. Right around 2000, 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. Went to a writers conference and met and kind of got to know a published author there by the name of Rachel Simon, who's written a lot of books, but she wrote Riding the Bus with My Sister, which ended up being a TV movie with Rosie O'Donnell and all this other stuff. Took a bunch of lessons from her. She was kind of like my mentor. And then just sat and spent about a year or so writing my first book, which was a mystery novel. That came out in like 2007. And then the second book is a little bit of a departure. I mean, it's nonfiction. It comes out of the journey my wife and I made while she was going through treatment for brain cancer. And it kind of like deals with caregivers. And at the time that we were going through this, which was 2014, caregivers were just starting to get some recognition that the stress they go through is very similar to the stress the patients are going through. And so there was a lot of things starting to churn at that point. And as we were going through it, I needed to write about it. I just to keep my own sanity. The very first night we were in the hospital, I was staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. going, I'm not going to sleep. What am I doing here? And so I just started writing a social media post. And I discovered a couple things. One, it allowed me to vent whatever was going on in this empty space up here. And it also became a way to keep in touch with all friends and family without having to make 15,000 phone calls every day. So it was like, ooh, that's a good idea. So I had all these posts by the time we got through treatment. And just to clear the air up front, my wife is doing very well. She's about 9 years clear. And, we are one of the lucky ones. And there are many who are not lucky. But we have a ton of gratitude for what happened to us. But in any case, so I had all these posts and I'm like, what am I going to do with these? I should write something. I should put it all together. And it went through a couple different iterations. And it finally came to the final product, which is, I don't have one in front of me, but you do.
I do.
That's a little book of Cancer Caregiving. Be a caregiver warrior and keep your sanity. The point of putting this together was two things. One, to give back, because our experience, anything that could have happened during our journey happened right. And so we're just incredibly grateful about that. So I wanted to give back. I wanted to produce something that would help other caregivers and not just be, like a memoir kind of thing, but something people could use. So the way it's set up and structured is like there's 21 tips for caregivers, and there's spaces if you get the hardcover or the paperback, there's spaces where you can write notes for yourself and keep track of certain things. There you go. Those were a pain to set up when I was putting the whole thing together, but they came out all right, and I'm happy with them. And I've had a number of people come to me and say, either one, this has really helped me, I appreciate it, or two, I wish I'd had this when I was going through my caregiver experience. So, and that's kind of the point of the whole thing, is just to give back. And if it helps other people go through, whether patient or caregiver, that's kind of the point of the whole thing.
And I like the way that you lay everything out, and you break down your journey and your process as the caregiver as you progress through diagnoses and treatment and what happens after that. And there, it's like food for thought. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. That you've got some things to think about and get your own thoughts on paper. And I know it's, cancer caregiving, but
It can
I
apply to anything.
it really does. It
Yeah.
really does, because that is not my journey. That is not, um,
Yeah, and
what we have going on here.
I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and the thrust of the podcast was really for dementia patients, people that were caregiving for dementia patients. And there's just so much cross things that apply in those situations that it's just, some of it is just very universal, regardless of whether you're doing dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson's, whatever it happens to be. A lot of the caregiver journey experiences are very similar.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this. Um,
That was a
and
big lesson for me to learn
yeah,
up front,
yeah,
because it was like, you get in that, or at least I did, I get in that protector mode of having to be on guard 24/7 and feel like everything, you're responsible for everything. And it wasn't until Sally's uncle came up to the hospital. The first week we were there was Thanksgiving week, and we were there for 5 days. And, being in the hospital during Thanksgiving is not a whole lot of fun. But, I'm sure it was less fun for the people who were on staff and on call that day. But it's weird being in a hospital in New York City on Thanksgiving Day, knowing that the parade is 4 blocks over this way and you can't see it. You have to watch it on TV. And it's like, this is very surreal. I can't deal with this. But the next day, Sally's uncle came up and he said to me, "You know what? You need a break. I'm taking you out for lunch." And I'm like, "Break? What are you talking about? I don't need a break." And he finally dragged me out of the hospital, and we sat down in this restaurant, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is what it's like to eat with real utensils and not out of a styrofoam clamshell." So, because every meal I had was either out of the cafeteria or it was takeout or something like that. So
yeah,
it was very important to learn that there are people out there that recognize what you're going through and want to help, and will ask you repeatedly, "What can I do? What can I do? What can I do?" And the best thing you can do is start thinking of things up front. Doesn't have to be monumental things, but start thinking of things up front that you can do or give
yeah,
to other people to do.
yeah. And I think, um, Alicia actually had her grandmother living with her until she passed. So she's,
Yeah,
she has the experience too.
I didn't realize quite how much I would relate, but it is. She lived with us for 4 years, and I had,
Mhm.
4 children at the time. She actually passed away 2 weeks after my 5th child was born,
Oh,
and yeah, she got to hold him, but she did not have dementia. She kept her right mind up until very close to her passing, but I couldn't leave her alone. And so I became her mommy. She called me her little mommy, and, it became very isolating to some degree because I would literally have to find a caregiver to come and sit with her if I wanted to go to the grocery store, and, we tag teamed really well, my husband and I, but it did get very isolating, and I didn't have it come on me suddenly like you did,
Right.
or like a lot of people do. I had time to prepare. We planned for it before she moved in. We knew it was coming. Um, but it was a interestingly beautiful time as well
Well
as
put.
sad.
I hadn't thought of that. That's very well put. And the tag teaming thing, I understand that completely. I mean, there were days early on, with Sally, and that's my wife's name. Her symptoms were she couldn't come up with words, or she'd talk to you, and then all of a sudden, nothing. And then her arms started moving on their own, and she'd reach for something, and it looked like she was flagging down 747s on the tarmac out at Newark Airport. Um, but there were times when, especially when we were home, not in the hospital, because I felt a certain amount of relief being in the hospital because I didn't have to be on guard. All the doctors and nurses and all the caretakers were there, and I could step back a little bit. But when we were home, I felt that it was my area 24/7. And there were days where it was like I would call my sister-in-law, Sally's sister, who thankfully lived about 15 minutes away. I say, can you come over here for like an hour, hour and a half? I just have to get out of here and decompress and rearrange my brain a little bit. And she would come over and sit with Sally, and I would just get in the car and go. And whether it was going to Wawa and getting a soda or just driving around for an hour, it didn't matter. Just something to decompress, because you can't be on call 24/7. It is physically and mentally and emotionally impossible to be on 24/7.
Yeah.
So
So our conversation today is a little outside the booth for sure.
I think it's
But
inside the
it's
booth as well, though, because these things affect who we are and they affect our performance and our ability to not just to run our careers and run our jobs, although I'd love to hear, Jim, how that went for you, but at the same time, how to take those emotions that we've been gifted, whether we wanted them or not, and to use them to be able to be stronger in who we are on our performances.
and that's that. See, the way my situation happened is that when this was going on with Sally, I was working in corporate at the time, hadn't gotten into the voiceover world yet. Was working in corporate, so we'd be in the hospital, and I'd take my laptop and go up to the rec center they had at the top of the hospital, and I'd sit and try to do work for 7, 8 hours a day, while things were going on downstairs, and I was up and down and back and forth, and it was tough to keep any sort of continuity, especially for all the people that worked for me and all my colleagues and stuff, because they didn't know whether I was going to be there or not. And it was just like, so it was tough on them. It was tough on me. And well, the one thing that I didn't discover until way too late in the game was when we were done with treatment, taking the time to decompress and maybe get some professional help, because I didn't take that time to decompress, and my head exploded. I mean, I was just like, it was one day I was on a phone call, and I was working from home, but I was on a phone call with my boss, and I am just screaming at the top of my lungs and ranting and raving. And fortunately, she had the foresight to say, you know what, I'll call you back when you've calmed down. Boom. And so it took me 45 minutes, and I had to work through that. But that was kind of a key moment for me to say, you know what, my emotions are out of control here. I need some help. Went to see a therapist, and we had a couple sessions. It wasn't anything long term, but just a couple sessions to talk it out. And it's really, really important that people realize that you need someone to talk to. And I don't care whether it's a therapist or a minister or a priest or a doctor or whatever it happens to be. You need that outlet, even if it's just a group of friends or a support group of some sort, which at the time there weren't any caregiver support groups, but they're starting to crop up now left and right, which is marvelous. So you need that outlet, or else your brain's going to explode because you've been through the same level of stress that the patient has been through, and you don't realize it sometimes until it's too late in the game.
Yeah. So
Where's the third here? What is her deal? Where is NJ?
I have not heard from her today. I saw her pop in on a Marco Polo, but she did not respond, which is not like her.
She's
You're muted.
It's like 8:30 NJ's time, right? Like we're
Yeah,
3
so
hours
she's
ahead of her now, so she's getting her kids to school.
She's sleeping in.
She's done with that. We usually hear from her by 10 our time.
Yeah.
So, with her, it's probably something that she'll FaceTime us later and she'll be like, "You are not going to believe who I just talked to." And first thing this morning, and because that's how it goes. Like there's always something cooking. There's always something on the back burner.
Very good impersonation, by the way. That was impressive.
She just doesn't stop ever. There's always something going on.
Because
and it's actually one of the reasons we've switched to the podcast style versus the scheduled interviews is because the three of our lives are just so crazy. It's kind of hard to grab all three of us on one day. This way, sometimes it's one of us, sometimes it's two of us, sometimes it's three of us. You never know what you're going to get. You got to pop in and find out.
That's cool, which has its own positive aspect. I can see the point of that, so that's okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to detail.
There's always a replay, so it's good.
Yep.
So, but tomorrow, where are you going to be?
I'm going to be at Browse About Books in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, doing a book signing from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And if you're in the area, stop on by, even if it's just to say hi. And this bookstore is very well known down here, and it's one of those stores you just love going to because it's huge, and one half is a bookstore, and the other half, and it's like a 2-block walk to Rehoboth Beach, the beach itself, and the other half of the store is a typical beach kind of store with towels and tchotchkes and cards and beachy stuff and all the signs and stuff. And you say Browse About Books to people, and they're just like, "Oh God, I love that store." And one woman said the other day, "I raised my kids at that store because it's got a big, huge children's book section in it as well." And it's just like, it's such a cool store. And they have this local authors program that you can sign up for, and you have to, do all the paperwork and stuff. And if they accept you, it's like, yeah, this is going to work at our store. Come in and do it. So, it's the book's already available there, but now I'm going to show up tomorrow and really scare people away by doing a book signing. So,
well, and I have actually, I loved it so much. I sent it to someone who I didn't even really know, but I knew what she was going through. And I was like, you know what? She needs this. And so
I've heard more and more of that. And people say, I send it to someone. Oh, sorry, I probably shouldn't tell you that. But no, I don't care. I mean, it's just like, you don't have to buy it for everybody. If you want to send them a copy, send them a copy. I've got lots of friends that have just, sent copies out everywhere. It's like, because like I said, the point of this was to help as many people as it could possibly help.
Absolutely. It is a fantastic book. So
thank you.
There we go. One more time. Jim Cooper, the not so little book of Cancer Caregiving. If you're around Rehoboth tomorrow, stop in, see Jim, get a copy of the book, get it signed. It is available on Amazon. That is where I got my copy. Jim, thank you for sharing your story.
My pleasure. I love hanging out with you guys.
Can I ask you a couple more questions, Jim?
Sure.
I'd love to know, you didn't have a writing background, right? When you started this?
No.
So what did that feel like to you, just taking this leap of faith to do this thing? I know you said you'd always wanted to do it, but I mean, I've always wanted to write a book, but I haven't, right? So how did you go from I've always wanted to do this to I've got this book in my hands? Talk to us a little bit about that process.
That was a long process. I mean, the first book, I used to take long, long walks, and I'd let the characters that I'd created just kind of scramble around in my head, and just let them interact with each other and see what they do. And it's like, oh, that'll be cool. I'll use that, and I'll use that, and I'll use that. And for the first book, I was working as a contractor in IT at the time, and the gig that I was doing had come to an end. There was really nothing else on the table, and we had some cash put away, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take 9 to 12 months off, and I'm going to write every day. And that's the key. Is it's not about getting published. It's not about even completing the book so much as it is about you've got to love the process of writing every day. That's what it's all about. And even if it doesn't have to be all day, even if you write only an hour a day, or if you need to work full time, if you write 2 hours a day, Saturday and Sunday, just so you get in a consistent rhythm of writing every so often. There is a great book written by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird, and it's her story of how she became a writer, and she's a very prolific writer. And the book is filled with so much wisdom about writing and the process of writing and why you should write and why you shouldn't write. And, that book spurred me on. I read that one, and I read Stephen King's book on writing. And the first half of it is kind of cool because it's his journey through how he got to where he is, which is very, very cool. Those two really inspired me just to say, okay, this makes sense to me. This is the way it's done. And I needed to set up the time to be able to do it. And then once you get through it all, and once you get that first book in your hand, there's no other feeling in the world like that. When that comes in the mail and you get that book in your hand, it's like, holy cow, I did this. And so it's like, that's a very nice icing on the cake. But the cake is writing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are days when you write something and you go, wow, that's good. I really like that. And there's days where you stare at the keyboard and nothing. There's just nothing there. And there's little tricks you can do. I mentioned Rachel Simon. She was just like, look, when you get stuck like that, just start typing words. They don't have to be anything, apple, crayon, a wall, a picture. And somewhere along the line, something's going to trip in your head. And it's like, oh, I can write about that. Even if it has nothing to do with the book, just start writing. When I finished the first draft, which is a huge milestone, you feel real good at the end of that, and then compare it to the final book, there's about 30% of the first draft in the final book. So you're going to rewrite it over and over. Just sit down and write, and don't correct yourself while you're doing it, because I started doing that, and I was ready to lose my mind. It's like I'd write something like, oh, that's not very good. No, just get it on paper. Get it on paper. Don't correct yourself. Don't do anything. Just keep going until you're finished. Then you're going to go back and do all your different revisions and drafts and that kind of thing. So there's lots of tricks and things to do, but the bottom line is you've got to set the time aside that fits in your schedule to write on a very consistent, ongoing basis.
It's interesting. As you're talking, I'm seeing all the parallels as creatives between the writing and voiceover. And
Absolutely.
the Chris McGinnis in the comments says it's similar to VO. If the process doesn't fulfill you, you'll never make it. And
Yep.
it's like that. We tell people when they call us, because I'm sure you get the same thing. People call you and say, how do I get started in VO? And it's like, well, first of all, tell me why.
Right.
If you want to do this because you think you're going to make a bunch of money, go somewhere else.
Yep.
This is not the career for you. If you want to do this because you just can't stand not to, you need to, it fills a part of your soul, so to speak, then okay, let's give it a shot. But understand, you're going to need to commit to it. You're going to need to put time and effort into it. You're going to need to research. And it sounds like you read books, you spent time, you committed by taking time off of work to really put in that energy and effort. And I think it's really fun when we can see how all of the creative fields we cross more than we realize.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. The number of people I've given the Sean Pratt test to, I should be paying him residuals, because it's just like, people come to me and say, I want to narrate audiobooks. And it's like, okay, pick a book you like, go to a closet, get a comfortable chair, sit in that closet 5 hours a day, read out loud to yourself for 5 days. If you still want to do it, come back and talk to me.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to know what success looks like for you, right? I
Right.
talk about that a lot. And it sounds like for you, success was having that book done and that you got it out there. And it's not whether it makes a bunch of money or whether
Right.
a million people read it. But it sounds like, also finding out that you touched someone, that you reached out and it affected other people like
Right.
JT, who's read it and loved it. It has to be a beautiful sense of
That warms
purpose.
my heart more than anything else. I mean, people who ask me, how are sales going? I don't know. I don't care. I don't pay any attention to it. But if someone comes up to me and said, your book really helped me, or boy, I wish I had this when I went through it, that means the world to me, because that has so much more value than any monetary, measurement you could put on it. And I can hear all my business friends going, that's stupid. Well, no, it's not. Do it and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's you do it out of a passion and a love for doing it, not because you think you're going to be the next Stephen King or the next J.K. Rowling. I mean, you got more chance of being hit by lightning than those getting to that level of fame and notoriety and success. So that's not what the bulk of the people that write books are getting to.
Right. So, Jim, tell me, is there an audiobook version of your book?
It's funny you should mention that. I am in the middle of finishing it up.
Yay.
I
Yay.
actually did an entire audiobook early on, which was stupid because I made so many different changes in the book after that. It's like, oh, this really doesn't apply anymore. So I actually, the past few days, I've been working on the audiobook version of it. So I'm shooting to have, by Memorial Day, to have a audiobook version of it out there.
Nice.
Awesome. That'll be great. Well, talk to us about what it's like narrating your own words versus narrating someone else's. Does that make it harder or does it make it easier?
It makes it so much easier, and only from the standpoint of, aside from knowing what words are there, I know what the emotions are behind all the scenes and all the people and myself. And so getting to that emotional state, which you have to do in audiobooks, is really easy, because it's like, oh yeah, I remember this, boom, and there's all the emotions behind it. So from that standpoint, it's relatively easier than doing someone else's work, where you have to figure out, okay, what's the author trying to do here? What's the emotion the author's going for here? And maybe not having a clear sense of it, but needing to talk to the author or whatever it happens to be to get to that point.
That was one
Yeah.
of the things I noticed when reading the book is, and because I know you, I could hear you.
I get
If,
that comment more often than probably any other comment. It's like people come up and says, yeah, this sounds like you.
yeah, you want to talk about authentic and realistic and your true self. You write the way that you speak, and it just makes it that much more real and applicable, and like you're walking through it with somebody.
Right.
It's not like a self-help book where they're telling you, oh, just do this, and when you feel this way, do this. It's you're right there in the trenches, putting everything out there, and that's, I think, the beauty of it.
So you calling me a wise ass? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Never.
have we pointed out your shirt? Because
It was
It's
one of
funny.
our hydrant episodes, and I got naked with Naked Jen. So
It's funny
Yeah.
though, because your shirt, your outer shirt was covering it up just enough that I thought it said not naked with Naked Jen. And I was like, that's so funny because it's on a shirt.
Nice.
So you're not naked, you're wearing a shirt, and both would be appropriate. That's a new shirt we need to make, NJ. She is listening, by the way. She texted me and said that she is listening. So she didn't miss it. She just
She
couldn't
made this.
pop in.
I have to give her props. She made this especially for me because when the four of us got together on the hydrant, I gave her all sorts of grief about not having a shirt that said this on it. So she went out and made a shirt and had it sent to me. So she's a sweetheart.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for
My
sharing your
pleasure.
story.
Thank you for
And
letting me come on here and talk about this because the more people that know about it, the better off.
well, what are the chances that in our chat and in our group, just with, I think we had at one point 10 people, 3 of those people had someone that they had cared for and can relate. So you've got a wider audience, I think, than you even realize. So
And that was kind of the point, the realization I came to is like, if I can help people, this is my experience, this is what we went through. And there was not much to grab onto as a caregiver when I went through it. So if this helps, any number of people, it's well worth the effort. And it wasn't even an effort. It was an act of love more than anything else, just to be able to give back and help other people.
Yeah, and that's obvious as you go through the book that
Cool.
that was your intention.
Cool.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. I hope you've got a line out the door in Rehoboth tomorrow.
Whoever shows up, great. And having done book signings before, it's always a hit and miss kind of thing where sometimes you get a lot of people and sometimes you sit there and talk with the staff of the store all day. So whatever
And that's
happens,
okay, too.
happens, and that's cool.
All right. Well, thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.